Good evening. And for those of you from the United Kingdom and the US of A, good afternoon. My name is Jaap Verwij. I'm the Managing Director of the Cancer Drug Development Forum, or CDDF. And on behalf of all of us at CDDF, I would like to welcome you to this webinar entitled Patient Access to Newly Registered Anti-Cancer Agents. Do I move the slides? No. For those of you who are not aware of CDDF, CDDF is a non-for-profit organization registered in Belgium, with the main mission being that we try to stimulate the rapidity of developing and getting access to anti-cancer drugs, the novel anti-cancer drugs that are currently in development. So we are aiming at the total process from in vitro diagnostics, in vitro research, up to the patient that is in need of good new treatment. We try to achieve this aim by organizing meetings that serve as a platform for all of those involved in the whole chain of events. So that involves academics, it involves industry, obviously, pharmaceutical industry, regulatory authorities, the health technology assessment agencies, but most importantly, also patients. We have several workshops every year, and we have one annual meeting always in spring. The workshops are always focused on one particular item, and the workshop, the spring meeting has a more broad focus. In addition, we also organize webinars such as the one that we are having now. A few important things to remember. All of you are on mute, which is intended to preserve a good audio quality. If you have questions to us at CDDF, so not related to the contact, please use your chat function, which is for most of you in the bottom of your screen. That's where you can ask questions to us if there are any issues with the technology. If you have questions that relate to the content that the speakers will present, you can use the Q&A function. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So it's important to use that part if you have specific questions. If you have a specific question to a specific person, so one of the lecturers, please indicate who you would like to ask the questions to. We have two moderators tonight. I will be I will be seconded, you could say, by Katrina Edfjell, member of the board of CDDF, and she and me will together look at the questions, try to combine questions if they can be combined, and we will make sure that your question is addressed to the lecturers. That means that the lecturers do not have to look at the Q&A text all of the time. For a better visuality at attendees, you can double click the Zoom screen to enter your full screen mode. That's something you have to do yourself. Now, our speaker tonight, our first speaker will be Karin L. de Groot, and after she has spoken, Professor Francesco De Lorenzo will give a comment on the patient perspective. Let me first introduce Karin L. de Groot. Professor de Groot is a professor of health technology assessment at Erasmus University in the Netherlands. She heads the section of health technology assessment of Erasmus School of Health Policy and Management, and is director of the Institute of Medical Technology Assessment. Her research mainly focuses on cost-effectiveness analyses of cancer diagnostics and treatments. Quality of life studies are also an integral part of her studies. Her main interest consists of diagnostics and therapeutic technologies, economic studies linked to the clinical studies, and modeling of those studies, cost studies, quality of life, real-world outcomes, methodological issues, and implementation studies, particularly in the cancer field. And tonight she will focus on her recent research that involved the actual access of patients to novel cancer agents. Karin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jaap, for this introduction. And it's an honor for me to give this presentation on patient access to newly registered anti-cancer agents. Maybe you already have noticed there's many news of this issue has been discussed in social media. It's a really hot topic. It's not only on the newspapers, but also on the radio, television, LinkedIn, or even the European Parliament asks questions here about. But you have to notice that the good news is there's an improvement in survival. we see a 5-year relative survival generally increase steadily over time for all European regions. And this paper dealt with data from the early 2000s, but even these years, the survival still improved. And that's also due to many innovative cancer drugs. Maybe you already have seen that with many new drugs, for example, for lung cancer, the nivolumab, but also other drugs like pembrolizumab, but also for even for many other cancers, we have new drugs available. Not only just for one indication, but many drugs have also more indications. For example, the pembrolizumab, it was just first registered for lung cancer patients, but later on also the company got approval for melanoma, head and neck, and so on, as you see here. So this is good news for many patients, of course. But still, we have also some bad news. When we look at the health expenditures from 2000 to 2015, we see a rise when you compare it to the gross domestic product. For example, for Germany, just from 2000, we have an increase from 9.8% to 11.1%. And on average in the European Union, we see an increase from 2%, from 7 to 9% in 15 years. But we also notice that there's a huge difference within the European Union. And this also has to do with unequal access. When we look at countries like Bulgaria or Lithuania, Romania, they spend about 16 to 20 euros per person on cancer treatments. But we look at countries like Germany and Luxembourg, it's 10 times higher, 180 euros per patient. And also when you look what the share is on drugs, this is the blue boxes here, you see that in the more Western European countries, more is spent on drugs. So also here you see these differences between countries and differences also in access, because if you spend less on treatments, the access is also lower. The result is that we notice a budget problem. In the Netherlands in 2014, we spent about 530 million on new cancer drugs, but the maximum growth that has been allowed was 1.2%. But new cancer drugs like nivolumab and pertuzumab just cost about 80,000 per patient. And the estimated budget impact was 200 million for nivolumab, pertuzumab 40 million, ibrutinib 100 million. So if you add all these drugs and you give them to a patient, you see that we have problems with our budget. That we got opportunity costs. What are opportunity costs is that what we spend on one patient, we can't spend on another patient. So if we give these drugs to the patients with the indications that has been they got registration for, we have problems on other parts in the healthcare. It could be not spent on other diseases, but also it couldn't be spent on, for example, like staff. So what we see that there are issues around sustainability and accessibility. And the sustainability issue is about reducing spending. And what are the solutions? Is that we can make a shift from expensive to more cheap technologies. We can also ask patients to pay a larger part. We can reduce the total use of drugs or reduce the price of drugs. And when we look at accessibility, then it's the question, how accessible are our cancer treatments to treatments or drugs? And about the first, sustainability, many solutions have already been proposed. For example, we have to deal with cost effectiveness ratios and thresholds. For example, in England, it's a threshold about £30,000 per quality adjusted life year. But also other options like pay for performance schemes already proposed. But we still have a problem. So I think we have to reduce the price of drug. And therefore, 2 years ago, we already make a proposal how we can calculate a fair price. And it has been published in Nature Reviews. And also we propose an algorithm how to calculate a fair price. And that is, of course, that we have to use research and development costs, number of patients, but also patent years left is of course important for the company. Production cost per patient per year, of course, we have to include. And also maybe we have to give the pharmaceutical company a profit margin. And these margins should depend on clinical value. And for example, we can use the ESMO magnitude of clinical benefit score. The ESMO, that's the European Society of Medical Oncology, has proposed these scorecards. And for every new cancer drug, there has been, they calculate a score, and it has been that is published on the internet. And these scores varied from 1 to 5 for palliative drugs, and A, B, and C for the more curative. And every drug with a score 4 or 5 or A and B should be accessible for all European cancer patients. For the scoring, they use outcomes like survival, quality of life, or other surrogates like disease-free survival or treatment toxicity. And we think that all drugs with these high scores should be accessible for all patients. But is that the case? And for that reason, we make some calculations, and it has been published already in August this year in Cancers, and it is about unequal access to newly registered cancer drugs. And you already see here the conclusion. It led to potential loss of life years. And also thanks to Reno Heijnen, Marieke Krol, and Jaap Verwij for participating in this study. Now I will give you more information about this study. First, I will give will tell you something about the aims and methods. Then I will give you present the results, and also, of course, the conclusions. The aim of our study was to assess variation in national patient access to several newly registered cancer drugs across Europe. And therefore, we compare the dates of submissions to the FDA and EMA, the time to first uptake, and speed of uptake of these drugs, and explore the impact of observed variations in access in terms of health outcomes. We use several methods, of course. First, we start with a retrospective database. The database was we got from IQVIA. And we got data from 12 innovative end-of-life cancer drugs, and they were registered in the period 2011 to 2017. The drugs have various indications, so breast cancer, gastric cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, and melanoma, and were drugs with various ESMO magnitude clinical benefit scores. The sales database, what I already told you, was obtained from IQVIA's Medias database. And we noticed that for the Netherlands, there were missing data, and we got from 8 manufacturers data for the Netherlands. So for 4 drugs, we didn't have data for the Netherlands. And further, we used specific cancer mortality data. It was derived from the Eurostat. It's just available by internet. And how did we calculate access to these drugs? I show you here this figure. You see first, this is just a procedure by EMA or FDA. And also, it took time. And the time between submission for the company, the dossier or the file to the EMA, and when they got market authorizations. But then, if there is market authorization, there's not immediately access of patients to the drugs. Because that's also every country in the European Union needs time to approve. So there's still time between market authorization and first access. And they need, for example, a health technology assessment. And also they have some clinical experts all have to decide whether or not to reimburse the drug. Further then, if there's approval in a certain country, not all patients could have immediately access to drugs, because there's also variation within countries and within hospitals or between hospitals in this patient access. But I will show you the results. First, I will give you some insight in the drugs we use, the indications, and also, of course, the variation in clinical benefit scores. We have several prostate cancer drugs like abiraterone, cabazitaxel, and enzalutamide. Melanoma drugs, dabrafenib, ipilimumab, nivolumab, vemurafenib. Breast cancer drugs, pertuzumab, palbociclib, and ribociclib. And gastric cancer, it was ramucirumab. And what we see is that the primary outcome of the clinical trials just varied. Some clinical trials showed as primary endpoint the overall survival, other progression-free survival or time to progression, and so on. And ESMO clinical benefit scores, the scorecard, just also gives some value to the outcomes, and also they include toxicity. And you see here that we have some drugs with score 2, some with score 3, but even also drugs with score 4. So these drugs should be available as fast as possible to patients, because it was also one of the intentions of the use of these clinical benefit score by ESMO. On this, here you see the total time that is needed for EMA or FDA to get approval of the drug. And this is just this column just presents the differences. And what we notice is that the average time for approval by EMA lost about 378 days. And compared to the FDA, it was 181 days. So there's a difference of 242 days, it's almost 8 months, that patients got later access, slower access in Europe compared to the US. And also, of course, there were differences between drugs, but overall, we see for all drugs that the FDA was faster. We all also know that the FDA and EMA have also priority reviews or accelerated assessment drugs. But even when you look at drugs with high need or high scores, we are just belong to the fast track procedures. We see that the FDA is much faster than the EMA, 139 days compared to 280 days. And in the no accelerated tracks, it was 410 days for EMA and FDA 223. So for all drugs, the procedures were faster in America. And not only for the drugs with high scores, but also for the drugs with low scores. But of course, we are more interested in the drugs with the high scores. Then comparing just the approval within the EMA, because what are the elements what takes just that what we see is we have the EMA procedure. The drug just got registration, but also there's time within the EMA, but also time of response by the applicants, because maybe EMA have some questions and answers. That's another time. And the blue boxes are the time EMA needed, and they need about on average 204 days for these drugs. The orange boxes are just a time the applicant need to respond on the queries asked by EMA, and the average was just 86 days. And the gray boxes is the time just from submission to starting the procedure by EMA, that was 27 days, and a positive opinion and just approval, that was another 68 days. So also these gray boxes have an average of 95 days that nothing happens within EMA. And on average, what we already noticed is that EMA is 240 days slower than the FDA. When we look at the time between authorization and first access, we see that Germany and the UK and Austria are the fastest within Europe. And of course, we have some Eastern European countries like Serbia, Greece, Bosnia, and Estonia, who are just the slowest. And even in these countries, some drugs even didn't make it. So we have not from all drugs are approved in these countries. So the patients don't have access to these drugs. The Netherlands was doing quite reasonably well, 128 days. And even Poland was also an Eastern European country. This was a real fast track compared to other Eastern European countries. And what I say, Estonia was the lowest, almost 1,200 days on average. And that was just only for 4 out of the 12 drugs. So 8 drugs are not even approved in this country or reimbursed. But when we look at the ranking based on the speed of drug uptake, and that's the time that the patients, not the time, but just the number of patients that we calculate that have access to the drugs, we see that given there is access in Belgium, and Belgium, I just forget to notice that Belgium wasn't that fast on the beginning here. Sorry, here was Belgium. But even when the patient in Belgium got reimbursement, of the drug is reimbursed, the uptake was the best. Belgium was at the top, and also Switzerland and France and Austria. And Germany was the first just in access, the first access to patients, but even when you look at the drug uptake, it wasn't that good in Germany. And UK was doing even worse. It was the 15th in ranking, so that's not that great. What we further calculate was the potential life years lost due to a delay in access. We use 2 examples. Abiraterone for patients with prostate cancer and ipilimumab for patients with melanoma. And we use these drugs because these were 2 drugs with an improvement in overall survival. Abiraterone with 3.9 months, and this was derived from the clinical trial. And ipilimumab was on average 3.7 months better, so an improvement of 3.7 months for patients with melanoma. And we calculate. Also, we have some assumptions. The overall survival was just based on the overall survival of the clinical trial. And also there was an 80% need for the drug. So we assume that 20% of patients just maybe are too old or have too much comorbidity and so on. So that not all patients in the countries should have access. Here you see every country just in Europe, and we calculate first was the difference in track between FDA and EMA, because that was also a delay. When FDA and EMA has the outcome on the same time, we can also save time, and also delay in access after EMA registration, and then we calculate the total life years lost for both. So the delay in access after EMA registration results in about 80,000 life years lost for abiraterone. And for ipilimumab, it's about 1,400 life years lost. When we calculate also, when we include FDA and EMA, then for the prostate cancer patients who could have access to abiraterone, we see a life years lost of 25,000, and life years lost for ipilimumab in total was 4,800. And in total, the result for these 2 drugs only, we see that we already have 30,000 potential life years lost due to a delay in access. And our conclusion is that patients in the US have faster access to innovative cancer treatments than European patients. and it was on average 18 months faster. Another conclusion was that a great inter-country variation in access to new cancer drugs exists among European countries, and even within Western European countries, and that the delay in access may result in a potential loss of many life years. What we want is for all European patients the most optimal treatment. So drugs with ESMO clinical benefit scores for 4 and 5 should be available for all patients because they are effective and safe. Some are even also personalized, like the immunotherapies or other targeted drugs. And one that there maybe are questions about cost effectiveness, but then we have to calculate maybe a more fair price for these drugs. And we just want to have them equitable for all European citizens. So the health outcomes of European patients can substantially be improved by enabling faster and more general use of available new medicines. And this presentation gives you more insight, and I think we have to make next steps. They are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. Nice presentation. It's my pleasure now to introduce Professor Francesco De Lorenzo. Professor Francesco De Lorenzo is not only a former doctor, but he's also a cancer survivor himself. He has been active in Naples and has worked at the University Federico II in Naples, and has been involved in a lot of activities in Italy. He was founder of the Italian Association of Cancer Patients, Italy's first cancer information service, and the Italian Federation of Cancer Patients, because he's also a cancer survivor himself. He's also been involved in the various networks in Italy, governmental networks of cancer institutes, the Italy's National Cancer Plan Committee, and the National Volunteer Observatory of the Italian Welfare Ministry. Most importantly for this evening, he's also co-founder of and former president of the European Cancer Patient Coalition. So he represents the voice here of the cancer patients in Europe. And last but not least, he's also a member of the CDDF board. So it's my pleasure to welcome Francesco and give him the floor now.
I was really shocked listening Karin report on this very important paper, because for the first time we have really evidence that the time between authorization, the first access to medicine has the results of 30,000 potential life year lost. This means that the short delay by EMA in the examination of the document and the very high level of pricing reimbursement must be changed, because otherwise this delay becomes a permanent killer for cancer patients. And to us, since 2013, came the idea that the only way to help member states, mainly for those that have a late have a late access for medicine to patients, depends from Eastern country. And then we thought that the best thing was to try to have a way to give a real value to the pharma at European level. And the only way to do this is the HTA and reimbursement change, namely starting from the approval of a new kind of HTA evaluation, just because we feel that the duplication of the HTA bodies with the different kind of evaluation just makes a big delay and a very strong difference between the member state in the evaluation of pricing and reimbursement. So then we felt that to work in the European Parliament. As you can see, in 2017, we were able to raise the problem in the ENVI committee through the presentation of an amendment that was just giving the need of changing the European Commission proposal on HTA, and that was just the way that the starting for having the commissioner to propose the regulation. Why HTA is so much important? Because HTA can be really instrumental in promoting innovation. And then HTA, the problem is that HTA is not used in all member states, and where used there are differences in process. Methods result in delays and various approval decision, and delays can lead to iniquities in access and acceptable loss of lives. So higher healthcare policy performance, a higher healthcare expenditure correlate with faster reimbursement decision making and with reduced mortality. But another important thing is also that HTA gives allow the possibility to really establish a giving value to the quality of life that is very important part for the medicine. So then there is the joint clinical assessment has been established. Now is under evaluation of the semester by the Dutch government, and I think that this will really make a big change, because as you can see, this allow also to overcome the silos, because we feel that innovative drugs really improve the patient quality of life and makes it easier for them to return to work. But then we should just try to see to the increase of pharmaceutical expenditure costs, what becomes in terms of less cost in reducing the hospitalization cost, and reduce also the specialist visit and cost, and then reduce illness, reduce social security costs, and increasing working capacity leading to increased product. All these things has to be considered to just justify also to policy people the increasing in the price of innovative medicine. So what the cancer patient can do, and what kind of help or what kind of role they can have in the full HTA. And as you see is, first of all, identification of patient needs, impact quality of life. That is a very important part of it. And then just trying to see what are the patient issues and also what are the patient needs. And as you can see, there are the two levels of HTA evaluation. There is the domains of HTA core at European level, namely the scientifically based, the multidisciplinary means of informing decision making, and HTA assessed to added value. So then safety and clinical effectiveness. Then there are those that are the other evaluation at member state deals with the cost of economics evaluation, ethic analysis, organization aspect, social aspect, legal aspect, and these belong to the role of the patient. And then we are just pushing towards having the HTA presence in the HTA bodies. So we feel that quality of life is very important, and we feel that recommendation coming from between in the 13 recommendations that have been reported by the Mission Board on Cancer, we feel that it's very important to develop a new wide research program on policy support to improve the quality of life of cancer patients. So then we feel that quality of life being considered third pillar of patient, starting from just diagnostic treatment and then quality of life, will also we followed at medicine evaluation. So then this is a very important part of the work that patients should do at member state level in HTA evaluation. And then the other thing that we like to stress is the cancer health equity. So then also in the mission on cancer, there is this need. This means that we have tried to make some changes. So then I feel that we have to try to follow up also the work that has been done at the Commission level, that is in the opinion of innovative payment models for high cost innovative. And then this means that existence of several issues that new pricing model intended to address. Uncertainty about the true benefit of the new product they decide to promote. And only one type of payment model will not be able to address all these objectives at the same time. Under asymmetric information between companies, and that's technology assessment provides a way to help system learn about such value. So then we feel that we should push towards trying to find a new kind of model, trying to start with the work done by the European Commission. And then we think also that it's very important they adopted the position written procedure on after the public hearing on the 25/10/27. So then we hope that all together we can establish an alliance to work and avoid that 30,000 people are dying every year because they have not quick access or they don't have access at all to the medicine.
Thank you, Francesco. It's time for the questions and hopefully give answers to those questions. We've had two wonderful presentations this evening on a very important topic, I think, for all of the cancer patients actually in the world. So, Karen, that brings me to my first question to you. You've indicated there are differences between FDA procedures and EMA procedures that lead to a longer period of assessment in EMA than FDA, but yet the number of days that EMA takes more than FDA is minimal if you compare to the enormous differences that occur afterwards. My question relates to that first part. EMA may be different from FDA, but there are other parts in the world as well. Is there any published evidence or information on how long the procedures last in other parts of the world?
As far as I know, I don't think so, but also in other parts of the world, especially in more developing countries, there are also problems with the non-expensive drugs, like tamoxifen and so on. So I think if you want to improve the quality of care for those patients, we first have to focus just on more regular standard care, and also like things like radiotherapy, surgery, just the standard care at our standard care at the moment. Maybe we can improve. So I don't think the discussion should be there about the expensive drugs.
Okay, for all of you online, you can ask questions in the Q&A box on the downside of your screen. We will translate those questions into verbal language to the lecturer, so don't worry about that. So if you have any questions, just post them there. And then it's my pleasure to hand over briefly to my co-host of this evening, Dr. Katarina Edgefiel. She not only has expertise from inside pharmaceutical companies, but also is an expert on rare cancers. Katarina.
Thank you, Jaap, and good evening, everybody. So we have had a couple of questions come in here from the audience. First of all, there's a clarification question which relates to the definition of access when you talk about the time between approval and access, and you gave the example of Netherlands taking an average of 128 days. How do you exactly define first access in this case?
The first access was just the day that it was that there was permission of the first uptake of the. So we know per month when a drug has been used in a certain country, and it was just the day of the first uptake. Some countries you can also check with the reimbursement agencies, but it was of course not possible for all 28 countries. So that was the reason we used that date.
Thank you. I think that should answer the question. So, Jaap, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, we have another question here, which relates to what type of therapy should we favor? Maybe we should spend more efforts on preventive medicine, preventive therapies, or on repurposing of existing medicine because they have been approved for use already. Just think about tamoxifen for high-risk breast cancer, which is used in the adjuvant setting now. Karen, is that a way forward? Should we put more effort in that field rather than trying to speed up the procedures for novel agents?
I think I prefer to do both. And at the moment, for the political agencies are not that interested in prevention because they most often the elections are just for 4 years, or they are elected for 4 years. So prevention take a longer time to show effectiveness, of course. I still agree that, especially also for cancer, just stop smoking and that kind of things, you see enormous impact on the number of lung cancer patients. So if you don't have the patients, you don't need treatments for them, of course.
Maybe I should ask the same question to Francesco. Francesco, if you see this question and you think about it, is there any specific field of medicine, anti-cancer medicine, that we should really focus on to solve the problem first?
Well, I first of all would like to say that actually now we know the delay in access to patient only for 2 drugs, ipilimumab and abiraterone. But I wonder whether if we are going to check the delay in all the innovative cancer patients, how many potential loss of more patients we can have. So then it's really very dangerous. And I think that since we in ECBC were working, our main mission when I was elected president was just to work at European level to allow to reduce the disparities. And HTA is the harmonization of clinical assessment and to avoid 50 duplication or more. So then I think that we have to work now and we should make an alliance because these delays are the killer of patient. And now we are talking about 30,000 life years, but only for 2 drugs. But I wonder whether Karen was going to look for the others, how many more we would have. So then I think that we should really make an alliance to work together and have the pharmaceutical strategy for Europe by the Commission as a big change in access to innovative medicine. It's not a question of which one would be best to go ahead. For all innovative cancer, we should try to work. And I think that in 2 years, the Commission would like to change completely. So I think that we should make an alliance between cancer patient, clinical and medical oncologist research to work out and see that this paradox will end.
I agree, I think, but it was just to give an example that delay has consequences for patients. And that's the reason we chose 2 drugs which have shown an impact on overall survival and with no discussion about clinical value, because that's also one of the things we don't want to. So you can imagine that for 2 drugs, there are much more drugs. It's much higher than 30,000 in Europe, life years lost.
That particular topic is also important. You mentioned there is a time to authorization also by the HTA agencies, and then there's time to patient access, basically, which is, to me, the point of time that the doctor decides to prescribe the medicine and can do that. And there is an enormous difference between the various EU countries. So there is difference in the HTA process versus the actual speed of uptake in the end. That means there are also other mechanisms, because formally the drug is available then for use the minute that there is HTA approval. How can we improve in that pathway there? And that's a question to both of you. Maybe Karen could answer that one first.
To my opinion, it has to do with the price of the drugs, because the prices are 100,000 and even higher. The CAR T cells from just above 300,000 euros. So you can imagine it's still a problem for hospitals when you have a fixed budget just to use that drugs, that type of drugs. And that's the reason I just started my presentation with also the issue about opportunity costs and the high prices. And to my opinion, we have the companies have to calculate with a more fair price. As a patient, you have a right to health, and that's just in tension with the commercial reasons for the companies. They want to have profits, and that tension, I think, we have to solve something like that, because also when we have an HTA and we have, for example, a dossier about cost effectiveness, when a drug, for example, nivolumab for lung cancer, when it's just below the Dutch threshold from 80,000, it was 79,000, for example, then even the budget impact could be 100 million. So then even we have a budget impact problem, even when the drug is cost effective or standard. So I think we have first to try to lower the prices of the drugs.
Thank you. Katrina, over to you again.
Yes, actually, Jaap, you had asked if Francesco wanted to comment.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
If I may say.
Yeah, I think that we, first of all, should try to have at European level a kind of harmonization of the real clinical value of a pharma. So that at least will be a kind of reference for each member state. But I agree, now prices are too high. You cannot really support that or accept that for one patient there might be 80,000 a year, because that's impossible. So that's a way to say patient will not allow to this kind of treatment. So I think that the other way is to change the model of pricing and reimbursement, trying as Walter Ricciardi tried to do in the innovative payment models for high-cost innovative medicine. They were trying to have a kind of characteristics that might become a way of getting all the member states having the same parameters to work on pricing and reimbursement. Let me tell you another thing, what might be for patient the big hope. The big hope comes from the State of Union speech by the von der Leyen. And I think that the best example that we should work to reach also for pharma would be the experience done for vaccine. So how much could have been the delay to patients in different countries if instead of having one buyer, that was the commission, having a very low price, and how would that be the difference between patient to have access to vaccine, waiting for each pricing and reimbursement? That should be the way. Europe should have one buyer for everybody, at least to this big pharma. But anyhow, this is something that we have to work together. I think the alliance is very important because the State of Union is going to listen all together. If we are the alliance, we can win.
Thank you, Francesco. Yeah. Katrina, it's yours.
Thank you. Yes, I a question for Karin about the algorithm that you shared in the presentation, which is calculating a fair cost. Do you actually have some real example here where this algorithm has been used, and if so, by whom, and what was the result?
Actually, we had a couple of calculations in the paper, but also the Dutch government asked me to calculate a price for Zolgensma, just a gen therapy, and two cancer drugs, and we will do it, I think, the coming 2 months, and that will be used for negotiations. So, and in the drugs in our calculations, that was enzalutamide, for example, the price was, I think, now 10 times higher. So it was 10 times lower than it's now they ask for. And even with a profit margin of 40% we used. So it's of course, we want also to stimulate innovation. So I think it's still fine when there's a profit margin, but not that high as we now do. And one of the problems is that was also the case for enzalutamide, but also, for example, for Zolgensma, is that actually the research development costs are not that high. That could be 400 million or 500 or even 1 billion. But the acquisition costs, sometimes the small enterprise is just bought by for example, by Novartis for 8 billion. So they already calculate with the cost they spent for 8 billion, just that they think that they can ask a high price. And that's one of the problems, I think. It just costs about 2 million now per patient. So it's incredible.
Karen, have you had any...
I think we can ask that price. So we have to change something in their minds, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Karen, have you had any feedback on this proposal from industry? And I was thinking also specifically,
yes.
how is there a difference in reaction between larger pharmaceutical companies that will have a different already infrastructure and revenue stream from existing products versus small startup companies who might actually really depend on the revenue from, let's say, if they have a first product launched to actually survive and be able to develop further products?
Yes, of course, I got also comments from the industry, and actually it also depends when you have from the medical department or from the more commercial, the marketing, for example. But even they understand the way of thinking, and that's not a problem. And also the algorithm is not a fixed algorithm, it's just to change the way of thinking about what is a fair price. But they always refer to that the price is just established in the United States. So we can't help, it's just the States, and actually their prices are even higher than in Europe. So I think it's broader than just Europe, but maybe when we have Europe as a whole, we have also some power for negotiation. If a country like the Netherlands, we are just, I think, 2% of Europe as the number of patients. So it's very difficult to negotiate with a company. And when the Benelux, that's the collaboration between Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg and Austria, and even Ireland, then it's already, you have more countries for negotiation. But as Europe, I think you can negotiate. Or maybe you can ask also for a fair price already. But it should be just or next door to EMA, I think, something like that. Yeah.
It will be interesting looking back in a few years, perhaps, to see what the impact may have been.
Yes, but the main problem, for me, it's not a problem that there are high prices if you can afford it. But you see that the consequence is that is no access for patients. And that's the reason I think we have to change something. Because even when I talk with them about Eastern Europe, then they say, oh yes, but that's Eastern Europe. So they in market things, it's not a good market for us because there's no money there. Instead of there are patients, we can help.
But that means that Francesco was just making a case for the European Union as a union, a true union. So we should have one buyer, we should have one organization. But that also means that if we do it that way and we use your system of calculating a fair price, the fair price that comes out of that should be affordable to all countries within that European Union. And we all know that economies are different as well. So how can we solve that problem?
That's maybe more difficult, especially for rare diseases, because one in my denominator is just the number of patients. For rare diseases, maybe the prices are higher. And one of the issues I already noticed is, for example, the parallel import. So when you get when a country like Poland pay a lower price, then we sold it to just in Western European, and then the pharmacists in Poland just have the gain, the profits, instead of that it comes to the patients.
So you're making a case for having a true union and one country only then?
Yeah, I don't think, but it's not that easy maybe, but I think just starting with a more fair price is just, that is a beginning. Yeah, for Eastern European country, maybe especially the parallel import, we should forbidden or something like that. I don't know. It's maybe another act or it's another.
Yeah. I have another question for you here, Karen. Well, it's clear that the new agents are not inexpensive, so we need to try to identify the patient population that might benefit from those new agents as early as possible, so upfront. That's why there is a lot of pressure also on companion diagnostics, and some of those drugs can only be prescribed if the companion diagnostic has been used and has indicated that the patient is in the appropriate population that could benefit from the drug. There's also a difference between the date of approval or marketing authorization of the drug sometimes, or HTA approval, and the companion diagnostic. So these may go in different directions. There could be delay in just the diagnostic when the drug is already approved for use, and so you can still not use it. The question is, did you study the delays of the biomarkers, the companion diagnostics as well? And is it possible to study those delays? If you didn't do it?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that there were differences in the time, because I think when as a company, yeah, maybe it's just another company.
Oh,
but
yeah, if there's
like
one,
Roche are just it's in the same company.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit silly when you have different times.
but sometimes there are different companies involved, and then there could be
maybe then
there
that's
as well.
and it's possible to study because we have access to EMA dates. Everything is on the internet. And also for our studies, we look at many files from the FDA and the EMA. So it's possible to study that as well. But I didn't so far. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there is a remark here that I would also like to bring to the attention of Katerina, because you've been involved in pharmaceutical industry, and we've discussed the issue of rare patient populations, which are different from the large markets that are more attractive, obviously, for most pharmaceutical companies. So how about being transparent in the price calculation algorithm that companies use internally? Would that make a difference? And that's also a question to Karen and Francesco.
Well, I guess for sure it could make a difference because it would make it more obvious where, you know, how the profit margins are being set. But I think it's very difficult also to compare across companies, because as I mentioned before, you have the really small startups, you have the huge companies, and they all have to factor in different variables in how they you know, how the drug development costs are being taken into account also for the company to survive long term. So, you know, certainly it would be good if one could identify maybe some elements of the price calculation that could be, you know, perhaps discussed and set a little bit more alike, you know, across the industry.
And could that help, Karen, to adjust your own algorithm? That's a question for Karen.
Maybe you know that already the European, there was a resolution that already has been accepted, I think in 2017, about prices and transparency. There's no continuation thereabout, so that's one of the problems. And I agree that it's for small enterprises, it's more easy. Yeah? For example, for Zolgensma, I could look up, and also for enzalutamide and some others. But like for drugs, for example, for Novartis, it's maybe because they have many other products as well, it's more difficult. But maybe sometimes you can also say what would be an acceptable budget for research and development. And it could vary between maybe 500 and 1 billion. And the maximum is 2.6 billion. That has been already published by Trust. So even in my price algorithm, I also calculated 2.6 billion. And what's the impact on the price? And it's not that much as just a little bit higher, but not 2 or 3 times higher then.
Okay. Francesco, how about the patient's perspective on being more transparent from all parties? I mean, not only us as academia and patients, but also pharmaceutical industry. You're muted, Francesco. You have to open your microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the major issue that we are raising is, first of all, to allow patients to be just accepted in all HTA bodies, because I think that the pricing and reimbursement that is a national procedure can be much more transparent if patients are allowed to be part of this kind of evaluation, because all the aspect of cost for quality of life, the value, according to us as a patient, we feel that a medicine that has also result a better quality of life should be also reimbursement having a higher pricing, because that will allow also the pharma company to work taking care of quality life. And I think that quality of life now, according also to the report of the Mission on Cancer, is the third pillar, because it is diagnosis, treatment, and quality of life. So then if patients are there, they can say really how is increasing the quality of life of a pharma company, and how much that will allow, for example, to go patient to work, and how much is saving the time for not being absent from the work. But let's tell me one thing, Jap, and I think that CDDF should work on this. The flagship action of the strategy that now the Commission decided for medicine, the first is a revision of the basic pharmaceutical legislation. That is not something to not consider for us. Should be CDDF, I think, should put particular attention to this. You know what that means? That a revision of basic pharmaceutical legislation, and the target date for a proposal is 2022. The other thing is a revision of the regulation on medicine in children and rare disease and rare cancer. And the third thing is cooperation between the national authorities on pricing, payment, and procurement policies to improve the affordability, cost effectiveness, and medicine on health system. You know what that means? It means that now only 10 countries are facing the higher level of cost of pharma for development and research, because the others, being after years, it's just going down the cost of development and research. So then if all the countries would buy together that kind of drugs, that it will be diluted. And so I think that the way how the Commission decided to review all the pharma legislation is a very, very good opportunity to work together. That will be my major important role in the European Parliament. As a past president of ECPC, I will work together. And we in this CDDF might get this as a flag for changing, because that is now what patients are looking for, to have access to medicine that can cure them. We were waiting 10 or more years, a lot of times, to wait this moment, and then we see that patients are not getting there and they are dying.
Thank you very much. So collaboration will be key. That's clear. Let's work together, which is exactly the aim that the CDDF stands for. I'd like to end this webinar here. Thank you all for your attention. Particularly thank the speakers for their wonderful presentations. Our next webinar will be end of January, so look out for the announcement over there. And for now, there's nothing else for me than to wish you a wonderful and particularly healthy holiday season, and hope to see you next year again. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.